Hello everyone, this is Jeff with Mississippi in the Civil War. Today I'm going to do something a little bit different. The title of this episode is The War in Their Own Words, 1861, The War Begins. And what I'm doing is I want to try and impress on the public just how important the written word was to Civil War participants, both soldiers and civilians. One of the great things about being a Civil War historian is that there are just so many letters and diaries and memoirs written by Mississippians during and after the conflict. And there's no better way to understand what the population of Mississippi went through than to read firsthand what they wrote about the conflict. And I thought I would pick as the first theme 1861, the beginning of the war. What did Mississippians think about the coming of the conflict? And this isn't a real long episode, but I thought you might find it of interest. And if you do, let me know. And I'll definitely do some more of these themed episodes using real documents written by Mississippians telling their firsthand accounts of the conflict. So let's get started. This is Walter W. Adams, who was from Vicksburg, Mississippi. He served in Company A, 21st Mississippi Infantry, and this is one of the early units to leave Mississippi and go to the war. And for them, the war was going to be in Virginia. This is the early days of the war, when it was all just an exciting adventure, and so many Mississippians could hardly wait to get into their first battle. And Adams was definitely one of these. In a letter back home, written just after they got to Virginia, he said, "It is generally believed there will be a brush at Manassas Gap in a few days. I would give a fine mule if we had our regiment formed so that we could have a chance of showing our pluck." And this was written June 25th, 1861. And he was mourning the fact that the 21st Mississippi was not in any condition to fight in a battle. They knew that one was going to be coming up soon in Virginia, and he was right. The First Battle of Manassas was just a matter of days away, and the 21st Mississippi was going to miss out on it. They were just not ready. But he really didn't have to worry. The 21st Mississippi was going to see more than their fair share of combat over the next 4 years. Adams would see more than his fair share of that combat. He was wounded at the Battle of Cedar Creek, Virginia, October 19th, 1864. He survived his wound and lived to a ripe old age, died in Memphis, Tennessee on March 31st, 1905. And this next quote comes from a soldier in Company K of the 5th Mississippi Infantry. And this was taken from a letter that he wrote to Governor John J. Pettus in 1861. And this is just, I love this quote. And he wrote, "The Scotland Guards," and the Scotland Guards were Company K of the 5th Mississippi Infantry, "are composed of the right kind of material to open a Yankee's bosom and show his black heart." First Lieutenant James Y. Cooper, May 18th, 1861. Yeah, there were a lot of Mississippians that had this kind of bluster before the fighting actually started. They couldn't wait to get their hands on the Yankees and show them how tough they were. James Y. Cooper was 28 years old when he enlisted in the Scotland Guards in October of 1861. Ironically enough, he didn't serve very long. He resigned from the service in the spring of 1862. I'm not sure that he ever got to open a Yankee's bosom and show his black heart, but the sentiment was there anyway. And in the early days of the war, uniforms for Mississippi troops were anything but uniform. Soldiers were clad in a bewildering array of colors and styles of clothing, and this following recruiting advertisement of the Hill City Cadets, which were part of the 10th Mississippi Infantry, kind of illustrates that fact. And this is what was written in the Vicksburg paper in April of 1861. Quote, 30 more members competent to bear arms will be received in the ranks of the Hill City Cadets, Mississippians preferred. Persons wishing to join us by reporting themselves to the governor, declaring their intentions to join the cadets, will undoubtedly be received and transported through to this place. Uniform yourselves with at least 2 gray flannel shirts and 2 pairs of common gray pants. A supply of hickory or check shirts will be found preferable to white shirts for wear. And you'll see this kind of thing all over in Mississippi in 1861. Every single unit had different uniform requirements, sometimes based on pre-war uniforms, sometimes based on the whims of their commander, sometimes just based on what they could find available locally. And so you see in the early days of the war, Confederate soldiers outfitted in a bewildering array of uniforms with very little in common with each other. But you will see as the war goes on, more uniformity in what Mississippi soldiers were wearing. But in 1861, it was basically anything goes. With the firing on Fort Sumter, April 12, 1861, the war had begun. And for a lot of Mississippians, the news that Fort Sumter had been fired on was just electric. The news was so exciting. And a good example of this is taken from a letter written by a member of the Vicksburg Artillery. They were on their way to Florida. They had stopped in Mobile when they found out that Fort Sumter had been fired on. And they sent this letter back to the Evening Citizen newspaper in Vicksburg, and it was published on April 19, 1861. And this unidentified member of the Vicksburg Artillery wrote this: "It is now near midnight, and the excitement is beginning to abate. The battle house and telegraph office have been thronged for hours, and speeches were made by many prominent Southerners. Many ladies were out and shared in the patriotic sentiment. And even now, at this late hour, the newsboys sing out, 'Latest dispatches, extra, extra, extra,' and in the distance I hear revelry and shouts of applause for the gallant Beauregard and the Southern Confederacy." The heady early days of the war before any blood had been shed. Yeah, there were lots of excited soldiers, just like this one from the Vicksburg Artillery. This next quote comes from a member of Company A, 14th Mississippi Infantry. And this was written after the war, and it's great because he explains his boyish enthusiasm for the war, but then he also explains how the actual war didn't live up to his expectations. And this quote is from Second Lieutenant George E. Estes. It was published in a book called Reminiscences of the Boys in Gray. It was published by Mamie Erie of McGregor, Texas in 1912. And it was a book of reminiscences of soldiers living in Texas. And Estes had moved to Texas after the war. But this is the quote that he gave. "I started out in May 1861 from home with the expressed intention of cleaning up all Yankeedom. I had been taught by demagogues and politicians to believe that I could whip a cowpen full of common Yankees. I lived and acted under this delusion till General Grant and his army met us at Fort Donelson. I soon found that the Yankees could shoot as far and as accurately as I could, and from then until the end of the war, I was fully of the opinion that the United States Army was fully prepared to give me all the fight I wanted." Yeah, Estes, he got his wish. He got more than his fair share of combat. He was captured at Fort Donelson, Tennessee in 1862, then spent time in a Union POW camp before being exchanged. He fought through the end of the war. He was wounded at the Battle of Franklin, Tennessee in November 1864. Fortunately, he survived. And he also, another quote of his, he wrote many years later, "I came home in 1865, not gay and scrappy as I started out, but a full-grown man, well-versed in hardships, privations, dangers, and the art of war. I was as tame as an old mule, and all I wanted in this life was some old clothes and something to eat." I love that quote. It shows just what he went through during the war in just a few words. But Estes lived a very long life. He died in Texas at the age of 81 on December 29th, 1922. And he's buried in Oakwood Cemetery in Fort Worth, Texas. This next quote is from David Holt, who was a member of Company K of the 16th Mississippi Infantry. His memoirs were published some years back, and if you get a chance, you should read his memoir because it is one of the best ones you will ever read by a Mississippian. And this quote is just a great one. When a lot of soldiers left in 1861, they were carrying almost everything but the kitchen sink with them, and they just didn't know how to trim down the weight for marching. And this is from his memoir describing what he carried when he went to war, when he left Wilkinson County. I gathered what I thought I would need at the front, including my gun and accoutrements, haversack, knapsack, a large overcoat with extra pockets, one extra set of underwear, 2 shirts, woolen socks, hat, cap, comforter, woolen gloves, knitted wristlets, handkerchiefs, and a large pocket knife. Besides these, I carried a knife and fork, tin plate, a full copy of the Bible, a copy of Shakespeare, a portfolio complete with ink and paper, a tool chest, 4 bottles of medicine, a mirror, a small boiler for coffee, and some tea and tablespoons. I absolutely toted all of that to Virginia. Private David Holt, a Mississippi rebel in the Army of Northern Virginia. And a lot of soldiers did that. And a lot of soldiers, as soon as they had to make their first long march, ended up throwing all that stuff by the roadside. You just couldn't carry very much as a soldier marching everywhere you were going, day in and day out. And this was a lesson that Holt and thousands of other Mississippians had to learn the hard way. And my final quote comes from 2nd Lieutenant William L. Nugent, who served in Company D of the 28th Mississippi Cavalry. A lot of Mississippians in 1861 thought the war was going to be short, in with maybe 1 or 2 glorious Confederate battles that would be victories. But some people saw things a little more clearly than others. Lieutenant L. Nugent wrote this in a letter to his wife dated December 10, 1861. He told her, "My humble conviction is that we have not yet seen the beginning of the end of this war. Years will pass ere the smoking of the ruins will disappear. Tears of anguish are yet to be shed, and homes remain to be desolated. May God in his infinite mercy avert the calamity from us." William L. Nugent, December 10, 1861. And Nugent was entirely right, and he would live to see it all. He survived the war and would return to his wife in 1865, but much of what he had prophesied in 1861 did come to pass, as it really was a tragedy for the state of Mississippi and the South as a whole. And this ends my little foray into the written word of 1861 and the beginning of the war. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, give it a thumbs up and let me know what you think in the comments. If you'd like me to do more of these with other themes, heck, if you want to suggest a theme, go right ahead. I'll see what I can do. Yeah, and I hope you liked it. I just love researching the spoken word and trying to share some of my favorites with the public. So have a great night, and I will be back with another episode very soon. Thank you.